Hi, I'm going to talk about critical pedagogy and its relation to empathy, and how, in my opinion, this is a very important tool in order to reduce or um, finish with oppression systems based on racial, sexual, economic factors, and also maybe other violence systems or violent systems. So first, critical pedagogy was a philosophy of pedagogics developed by Paulo Freire as a way to critique the banking educational model. And this banking educational model, it was composed by two participants. One was the oppressor, that was the teacher, that had a voice, that was knowledgeable, that had the experience, and the other participant was the oppressed. In this case, the oppressed is the student that is passive, that is empty, and it needs affirmation by the teacher in order to have a voice. So Paulo Freire basically argues that this is just a training for what the actual economic social system works like. He says that we need to remember that the ultimate goal of education is to increase humanity, and he also says that in order to achieve this, we need to finish with the vertical educational model, and we need to create a more horizontal educational model where the teacher and the student is equally has equal value in, in within a democratic system. This is what he calls effective education, and he says that through listening and through good channels of communications, we can reach conscientization. That is basically just empathy in modern words. Um, because we're all equal and we are not supposed to be oppressed by sex, race, or economic or political or religious views. Um, he says that this can be solved within the education community, within the academic community, by a model of education that he calls it problem posing pedagogy. So this model, what does is that it it creates a dialogue between teacher and the students. So the teacher proposes a theme or a problem. The students discuss the problem, their approach, their experiences about the theme or the topic, and they discuss the possible solutions, they come to a conclusion, and then they work all together in order to establish this possible solution, or to let others know if it's too much of a big issue and they cannot do um, um, an impact, uh, a solution that has a big impact, then their job is supposed to um, socialize their possible solving channel for this problematic. So basically, what I found in the articles that I read was that there are many teachers around the world that have developed strategies based on this problem posing pedagogy, depending on their specific problems. For example, in the United States, some African descendant teachers decided to develop this model as a way to create consciousness about racial issues within the educational community, within the schools and the school system. Other teachers in Cyprus decided to implement a role model, role playing model, a strategy in order to create consciousness and empathy about economic problems after the big recession in and Europe a couple of years ago, and all of these strategies are based on problem solving pedagogy. And what these teachers did was that they proposed an actual real life problem that they had at the moment, and the students needed to solve it. And the way that they did that was by helping the students with good readings that they were able to criticize or to analyze in order to understand in a deeper level the problems that society face regarding economic issues and racial issues. So another very important part of critical pedagogy is that Freire states that dialogue is a very important part of this, as we understand from the first two articles. And he says that the dialogue cannot be just among the oppressed. It needs to go beyond that, and the oppressor needs to understand what their social problems are. So basically, the other part of the situation was, for example, for the teachers that were trying to have a racial approach to the oppression system that are within the United States. They also realize that there is a big problem where big communities that are very diverse have usually white teachers, middle class white teachers. So this means that the teachers don't actually realize what the problematics are, and they don't even understand that there is a problem to solve, so they don't apply any critical pedagogy at all. So this article states that teachers also need to develop empathy, especially if they are from a dominant class or a dominant race or gender or economic situation. Furthermore, there was also a study, the first study I read, that basically said that we don't need to bring the critical pedagogy approach only to public schools, even though it was designed originally for this. We need to adapt to the current situation of the United States. And for example, the writer of the article states that it is very important for us to take this critical pedagogic model into private or independent schools. So she states that more and more underrepresented students are moving or are being transferred to private independent schools. So this means that the diversity and the race diversity is expanding within these private and independent schools. These private and independent schools are where traditionally upper and middle white class people graduate from, and they tend to always go to very important universities as well. So the writer of the first article says something that I very much align with, and is that we need also to take critical pedagogy to these students in order for them to understand that there is a problem within the system, and that if they feel empathy and they feel that there is a real thing that we as society need to solve, then when they grow up and when they acquire the power that they're supposed to have that is dictated by the system, then they will create a change and have actual consciousness about the fact that they need to do something. So finally, the last article that I read, it was a little bit more radical, and it said that critical pedagogy was not enough, basically because it was seeing the problem in others, and that um, we need to have a better approach in order to solve the problems from the root. So uh, this was an article that talked about social engaged Buddhism, and basically what it said is that we need to alter our own thoughts in order to actually make a change. From my understanding and my point of view, critical pedagogy doesn't want to destroy the system. It just wants to improve it in order to create equality. Um, so I understand the critical pedagogy system as a way to eventually create empathy within people in such a way that they will be more will appreciate more society instead of goods, right? Instead, this article said that critical pedagogy was not enough, but we need social Buddhism that will eliminate the ego completely. So this means that we will not need, or we will not want anything at all, anything like any kind of good at all. So we will be all um, more humble and more and better thinkers and more sensitive, and we will have an original or um, very strict sense of community. I do not agree with this because this is too radical and too extreme. I do think that it is necessary to create critical thinking, or to awake a critical way of thinking within our students and within our society. We cannot just relegate this to the students and the teachers. We also need to involve the whole community around the schools and around our students. Um, so I think and I firmly believe that this is a very good approach in order to not only solve oppression situations, but also to avoid future oppression situations.